Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Sonic Touch, the show dedicated to making music on touch devices. I'm Nick Batt.
And I'm Gaz Williams.
So last time we looked at a couple of synths from Jordan Rudess that kind of worked on the using the touch interface as purely the only way really that to interact with the instrument. But today we're going to look at a couple of synths that require perhaps some more traditional MIDI keyboard and controllerist activity. So for that we need to talk about class compliance. So Gaz, what is class compliance?
Well, class compliance means that you can plug a device into your computer with a USB connection and it'll just work. You don't need to download any specific drivers. It'll just...
Because obviously with the iPad, we cannot actually download any drivers. No. It has to be just work out of the box because there's nowhere to install any drivers. So that's why it has to work that way. So first of all, Gaz has actually found kind of some cool hardware to hook up to your iPad that's over 10 years old, right?
Yeah. Well, the Novation X Station series, which, yeah, I think we're around 10 years old now, it's got a USB audio interface and a MIDI interface all combined into one, and a keyboard and a control surface. And it works with the iPad. If you've got the camera connection kit and then you plug in with a MIDI cable and then you're good to go. You've got an audio interface, 2 microphone preamps with phantom power. The thing runs on batteries, so the whole thing's kind of mobile as well. It's actually works very well indeed. And the 49 key version and 61 key version have got a nice space on the side there that the iPad can sit on quite comfortably.
So what's cool about this is you can use familiar synthesis controls like cutoff and envelopes, what have you, on the front panel to access the similar controls in the soft synth in the iPad, which is actually really cool. I used to use a Novation K Station because that had a lot of knobs on to map via MIDI into various soft synths. So it's a very useful paradigm to use. It kind of shortens the which knob do I grab kind of thing because it's got a label on it from the get-go.
So an app that's taken advantage of that is Moog's Animoog app, which is a brilliant and unusual synthesizer. It's been out a short while, but now it's got this added functionality. It's brilliant. It means we can turn it into a hardware synthesizer. Let's have a look. We did have a look at Animoog in one of the first episodes, so go back and have a look at that if you want to find out more about it. But if we look at Animoog now, within the setup pages, there's a button now called Map CC. So if we touch that, a red box has appeared around all the controls. And then what we just simply have to do is select the control, in this case, cutoff frequency, give a twist, resonance, give a twist, etc. Just work your way through that. You only need to do it once. Once you've done that, come out of Map CCs, you just go click Save Configuration. Therefore, every time you plug this particular keyboard into Animoog, then it'll recognize those controls.
We should mention actually that if you want to set up for different keyboards, you're going to have to do that as well. It doesn't remember that you've got a Novation or indeed perhaps a Venom plugged in, because we did try this for class compliancy and the M-Audio Venom also worked as audio and MIDI out of interest, but it will remember sort of the last configuration.
So once we've done that, then we can then play our synthesizer on the keyboard and adjust things with the hardware controls. And it's quite nice then with Animoog because you could then use the touch screen as well to interact with it. So if we were using, a new thing as well, categories. It's got categories for our presets, which is cool. So I join it, and I can move this thing around with here, and then I can combine it with hardware controls as well. Festival
Sweet, so it actually brilliant because we do like the Animoog. We've seen it and it's getting a lot of, it's had a lot of critical acclaim because it's actually quite an interesting sounding synth. So to add that extra kind of control aspect to it just makes it even more hands-on.
Definitely.
So we should mention that not all devices are going to work, even if they are class compliant. In some cases, they're going to draw too much power, like the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 I've got here, didn't work right out of the box, but if you plug it into a powered USB hub, that will give it sufficient power to then work with the iPad. In fact, this does. You can use one of these as an audio interface to your iPad as long as you've got a powered hub. And that's going to be the case with a couple of things, particularly things that perhaps need phantom power for microphones or whatever.
So last episode we looked at these unconventional synths that use the touchscreen idiom, but now we're going to look at some synthesizers which are much more traditional and will really lend themselves to hooking up to a traditional keyboard. Okay, so let's go ahead and load in Magellan. Okay, so Magellan is kind of a fairly standard subtractive synthesizer, but it has got some interesting twists which are worthy of mentioning. So we can see its layout. There's two kind of main panels to the synth page, But the kind of cool thing about this is that it's got like 2 separate synth engines, which you can either play as separate sounds or layer them together to sort of get a, you know, like a real big multi-layered sort of synthesizer. On the keyboard, on the physical keyboard, I'm going to hold the chord down, and I'm going to hold that down here. Now I turn on keyboard 2.
Oh, and that's a separate synth sound completely?
Yeah.
So what's the basic synth structure then?
Okay, so it's a subtractive synth, as I said. What that means is it's, you know, basically based on, well, in this case, 3 oscillators, sort of a filter, LFOs, that kind of thing.
Multiple waves? What are the waves?
Let's have a look. So we got triangle, sawtooth, square wave, yeah, with a pulse width, triangle.
All the usual suspects.
Usual suspects, but 3 oscillators, and this is per synth, you know, so you can double that because like if we were to synth couple, we can make that's playing the one keyboard play both synth engines simultaneously. So then in our second panel, we've got 2 filters and a modulation matrix as well.
Multi-mode on the filters, quite a lot of different modes are there?
We've got, there are different modes, and there's different, so we've got like the Magellan low pass and high pass, and we've got the Victor, and there's formant filter and comb filter as well, so quite a lot of filter options.
So, I mean, in terms of synthesis, and then of course we got all the effects that that we can add to that as well, right?
Yeah, that's kind of in the form of like kind of effects rack. So,
wow.
Yeah, so you kind of lots of information being thrust at you all the time with this particular one. So it would take a while to sort of be able to navigate it sort of comfortably, I think. It's got this chord mode, which I like, which when you enable that, it means you can map multiple notes to single key presses. So that means you can play chords with just one touch. So here in a minor scale, you know, we can do that kind of thing. We can also, if we drag this out, we can change it from a keyboard structure here to a touchpad, which we've seen this on a few other things. There's one nice feature on here that I've not seen before, and that's the octaving. If we turn that on, it gives us like three octaves per note. So it's just a different way of playing on a, you know, you can slide around it.
Sort of fun-packed and action-packed.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as the sounds go, it's capable of some pretty sort of large and big kind of stuff. It's got an arpeggiator in it, that side of things, right? It has,
and which would be more through this kind of sequencer kind of approach. What I should mention, that if we look in the presets though, Sunshine Audio, who have recently just started making presets for iOS synths. There's a big library of their sounds.
They're really good, some of those. Can we listen to a couple?
Yeah, let's have a look. So classic synth. I'm playing on the keyboard here. Let's say Jupiter Orbit. I wonder what that's redolent of. Oh, I think we're overloading there.
Oh, lovely. Any more?
Let's have a look. Pulse width.
So it seems capable of kind of quite a broad spectrum of sounds, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like some of the other synths, Animoog Pro immediately springs to mind in terms of being a fully featured synthesizer that, in conjunction with like a hardware controller, you know, would give you plenty of options for some sonic.
And you've got a little CPU meter as well, so you can see what's going on, right? Just up here. Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Gives you a rough idea.
We're not seeing any action on that hardly, so maybe it's quite efficient. Well, I'm sure that'll depend on the patches.
Any other, I mean, it works in background audio, you can control it from external.
Background audio, yeah. One thing I wanted to show you, if we go into the sequencer mode and load in a song, we start that.
Oh, that's cool. So you got kind of like Ableton Live type pattern switching going on.
That's right.
There.
So you can just jump between the patches and then you can sequence this with this grid here. So I think if you were just really to work with this one synth and this one synth alone, you could probably achieve some great results. As I said, I think the interface is quite heavily burdened with controls.
Yeah, I mean, I did find myself, I had to kind of squint a little bit, but then I do need glasses, so it was a little bit kind of like, wow, this is a bit much, but some really good stuff there. There's an XY pad there as well, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So from the sort of synth mode, and this is kind of mappable within our matrix, we can kind of map various parameters to this little kind of chaos pad thing here. At the moment, it's set to FM mix and yeah.
But you could do filters and all the usual suspects.
We got it up in the top here. We just say basically, here we go. Here's our whole list of parameters. So we could choose what's the X and what's the Y. And then we've got that mappable on there.
So I'm guessing with this, if you had a splittable keyboard and you had on 2 separate MIDI channels, you could play both synth engines as separate synths as well, right?
Because it'll respond sort of multi-timbrally on the different MIDI channels there. There is a MIDI learn mode as well, which like we just saw on the Animoog, if I hit learn here, then we can go into learn and we can sort of hit the control, we can give it a little control twist on our physical one and we map it, and then so forth. And as we can see, every parameter is mappable via MIDI. So we could really kind of go to town with all the controllers and really get a nice real-time mixture. As I say, some of the parameters may be better to actually adjust on the touchscreen, like for instance the XY pad, but then other ones, as you mentioned earlier, it's nice, isn't it, like a tactile feel. Certainly I like envelopes. I love to be able to sort of just
use faders.
Faders for envelopes, yeah. So
Magellan is available from Yonac software at a limited price, introductory price of $2.99, which is about
$499, I think.
$499 US dollars. Yeah. So well worth checking out. I don't know what it's going to go up to, but right now you can get it for a knockdown price.
Almost in stark contrast to that kind of busy interface of Magellan is the other synth that we're going to have a look at, which is called Cassini.
So here's Cassini by Icegear Instruments. It's a much more sort of open interface, and they use this kind of tabbed approach, so you can hit all the different oscillators and filters. There's 3 oscillators, 2 filters, amplitude and a delay plus an arpeggiator. So coming straight back to the keyboard, I've got this hooked up to my external MIDI keyboard here. You can't quite see it, it's just out of shot, but it's a M-Audio, what is it? Oxygen 49, that's right, and that's just going straight in. It's got enough power from the iPad just to run it. And immediately I've got mod wheel is mapped to the cutoff frequency. It's quite a nice sounding synth actually, I have to say. And you can do quite a lot of stuff with it. It's got a very familiar looking interface, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think the name Cassini
might be a clue. So what have we got here, Gaz? I think if I hold that as just a bit out, there are similarities with the, particularly when you go into the edit pages, you get these little buttons at the bottom, which are very similar, reminiscent. So quite cool.
Funnily enough, I thought the tone somehow reminded me a little bit of Casio synths.
Oh, I think that's a bit harsh. And there's a load of patches here. They're not particularly well named. I created a few myself, which I just think you can do some really interesting kind of patch stuff. The pads seem to be where it excelled.
And you're using the controllers there that you've mapped already.
Yeah, interesting enough, you go to the it's the global section, I think, and you've got the ability to map controllers. You just hit which way you want it to go, and there, if I use one that I haven't done, there's just tons and tons of them. So those 4 controllers you would think would be controller 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's actually quite misleading. It's actually 16, 17, 18, 19 that you need to map, which got me quite, well, it got me, and I was thinking, oh, it doesn't work. And what they can correspond to are these 4 controllers here, kind of similar to what you get on the Venom actually. They're just sort of mappable controllers. One thing that I did find was a little bit disappointing is when I tweak the control on here, they don't actually show up on the front panel. It would have been nice to see them real-time updated, but I suppose, you know, you can't have absolutely everything.
So in terms of the synthesis engine?
Well, the synthesis engine actually is fairly standard, but it's got a few interesting tweaks. In the oscillator, we got essentially, if I go to, let me just go to a patch and I initiate it, I'll initialize a patch. There we go. We go to oscillator 1. We've got to choose between sawtooth, pulse, triangle, sine, noise, FM. We've also got a wave shape for each one. So you can modulate that, which is kind of cool. So if I modulate that, say for instance, I could make it into a kind of fairly extreme sawtooth there, but then I've got this sort of ability to accent as well. So I can accent the LFO, which is really cool. In fact, if I take it to the filter, you'll probably hear that a bit more. Bring the filter down, LFO, take the LFO speed up, and then change the accent. You get this kind of like rhythmic kind of quality to it. So there's a very interesting little kind of bit of synthesis, twist there.
And speaking of LFOs, something I noticed that I thought was quite cool was that you've got LFOs on every page. So you can have independent LFOs for all 3 oscillators, and LFOs for both of the filters, LFOs for the amplitude. You know, so.
And the delay as well, actually. There's an LFO, you can modulate the delay as well, I think I saw here. If we switch the delay in, you could get into this kind of weird, wobbly pitch modulation world quite quickly. And even though it doesn't have any other effects, I mean, we're just talking delays here, there's quite a lot of just sort of funky and very ethereal sounds. I mean, I would say it's probably better for pads, perhaps, than other sounds. So, I mean, there are some other sounds in here which are kind of, but they're not labelled, so it's a bit hard. If I flip through a few more sounds.
It's interesting in that it does sound quite different from Magellan, for instance. And
yeah, you know. It seems to be purer, less dependent. I think any synth that's got lots of reverb and other effects on it, you kind of get a sense there's more of a wash to it. But I think with this, it sort of feels like it's somehow cleaner. There's also a fairly powerful arpeggiator in here, which I must admit I didn't really get my head around extensively. If we switch that on, you can edit all the different steps to it. You've got various different patterns, up and down, beat divisions, rate. Do some interesting things there. The other thing that's quite cool, again, you've got this chord memory thing as well. So I can take, say, a C. If I go to a C and then I add, and then take another step up.
That looks actually clearer and easier to understand than the one in Magellan.
And a D.
Effectively the same system, but that's actually laid out a little easier to see.
It seems, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is because they've used this tabbed interface, everything is just easier to see, and it's kind of easier to get your head around. And I think the thing with Magellan, whereas I liked it, it's just, when I started looking at this, it made immediately sort of more sense to me as a programmer to be able to kind of get my head around it. Incidentally, I should mention that on all the pages, you've got these little keys here, so you can continue to play while in edit mode. Which is just a nice touch. Cassini is from Icegear Instruments, and I think it's £1.99, something like that. I mean, it's next to nothing, really. What's about $2.99, maybe $2.49, something like that. One thing I did want to point out again is all of these 4 controllers are completely mappable, so you can effectively change the character of the synth in every single patch, just by fiddling with a few knobs and kind of really get there. And it allows you to kind of just tweak various different parameters in real time. And there's not a lot of them, but there's sort of enough to make the design into your own patches. I must admit, for me, it kind of made more sense than perhaps Magellan, but I know you were very keen on Magellan.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the fact that they've got their own sonic sort of stamp makes them kind of worthwhile, you know, and they're so cheap, you can build up a collection of synths, you know, just for a few quid, and it's kind of pretty crazy, really.
And so, yeah, we're looking at Magellan there, which, don't forget, comes with a bank of Sunshine audio patches, which are of high quality, and that was Cassini as well. So that pretty much brings us to the end of another Sonic Touch episode. I want to thank you very much for watching. Well, as ever, please leave any comments or suggestions below in the aforementioned comment section, and we will do our best to act upon them in some way. I've been Nick Batt, and this has been
Gaz Williams.
That's it for this week. Thank you very much.